So as I was saying, um, there are four reasons why Donald Trump and why Russia might want Donald Trump. The first reason is the chaos he creates. The second reason is his specific policies. The third reason is that he does business very much like the Kremlin does business. And the fourth reason is what we don't know. Is there a smoking gun, a direct connection between Russia and Donald Trump? And we don't know. Here's what we do know. We do know that what I've been saying is there are 10,000 warm guns and a sky filled with gun smoke. So there's all these reasons to believe that there might be strong connections between Donald Trump and the Russian government. Isn't that enough? Isn't that enough to not to criminally prosecute him, but to think about that maybe Donald Trump is not a guy we want to be president, and maybe he is not making decisions based on our best interest at heart, but based on other motivations. And the Russian government is very dangerous, so we really can't afford to make those kinds of mistakes. So I may have to stop it there because I'm not convinced this live stream is working at all. Hold on one second.
Like the chaos that Trump. I may have to stop.
Oh, you know what? There. Yes, it's still working. So sorry, I'm new to this, and I apologize. So let's move on to our next thing on the agenda, which is Vladimir Putin. What is going on with Vladimir Putin? Last weekend, we saw I don't want to overhype it. There were very large protests in Moscow and some other Russian cities. The consequence of that is that we may be seeing Putin throw his prime minister under the bus. And here's what that means. A big aim of the protests were to criticize Dmitry Medvedev. Now, Medvedev is very important to the Russian to Vladimir Putin. So Putin comes to power in 2000, and he wins 2 terms. And in 2008, he would have been constitutionally blocked from running for a 3rd term. In comes Dmitry Medvedev, who was Putin's first deputy prime minister at the time. Medvedev runs for president and he wins. And he wins because Putin backed him. And then Putin is named prime minister. And Medvedev then changes the law, the constitution, that would allow a president to run for more than 2 terms. And Vladimir Putin runs again in 2012 and wins. And this sparks big protests, like really big protests, because there were people who actually thought that vote was rigged, beyond all of the other really sketchy things that were going on. So what happens then? So what's happened since is Putin is president, and now he's going to be president. And we're now facing presidential elections, and a Russian anti-corruption campaigner, a guy by the name of Alexei Navalny, has been holding these big protests and focused on the corruption of Medvedev in particular. And so in the last few days, you've seen evidence that Vladimir Putin might be interested in investigating Medvedev, in pro-Putin sort of authors, publicists. have written negative articles about Medvedev in key pro-Kremlin news outlets. So there's some signs that maybe in order to make sure that he doesn't have problems during the presidential election, Putin is going to throw Medvedev under the bus. That is fascinating. Medvedev is not particularly important himself. In fact, he's basically just a puppet. He does everything that Vladimir Putin wants him to do. But in by the way, in like really comically ridiculous ways. Like he's literally Putin's caddy when they go golfing, and he holds Putin's gun while Putin hunts, and he like baits Putin's hook when they go fishing. It's really preposterous. It's comical though, and just physically, the difference between the two, or their relationship is comical. But anyway, so what that means is that first of all, Putin is taking this threat very seriously. That is interesting on a whole bunch of different levels. Maybe he's paranoid, or maybe he actually thinks that there's significant opposition against his rule. And it could mean, I don't know what it's going to mean moving forward. We're going to have to watch this. We're going to have to continue to watch this very closely. So, the last thing on the agenda that I wanted to talk about. I am going to be writing a piece on this very soon, I think. But lately we've been talking a lot about energy policy. With the Keystone Oil Pipeline and now the EPA being defunded. And this is confusing on a lot of levels. If you zoom out from traditional politics just a little bit. Because more oil on the market doesn't make any sense for the American economy. So here's how oil works. The oil economy is global and it's commodity based. So if you kind of think about it, imagine that there's one giant bucket of oil in the entire world, and everybody who makes oil pumps their oil into that bucket, and then they get a share of it's all sold for the same price, and you get paid based on how much oil you put in that bucket. That's more or less how the oil economy works, actually. Vastly oversimplifying. But it's a global commodity. The prices are the same everywhere. So when there's too much oil, right now there's too much oil. That is why oil is at $2 a gallon. Or gasoline is at $2 a gallon. Oil cannot escape this $50 to $55 a barrel rut that it's in, because the United States massively increased oil production under Barack Obama, and it didn't come from off-sea drilling or Arctic drilling or any of the hot button issues. It came from new technology that was able to get oil out of these tar sands and shale and things of that nature. And it also came from a lot of little producers. If you go to places like Pennsylvania or some places in the sort of south or southwest, you see that some people will just have a little oil rig in their backyard. And all those producers, producing oil costs money. So what's happened is that as the price of oil goes down, producers have to shut off their taps because they can't make enough money. Or they pump barrels, they fill barrels with oil, and then they store that oil. Or they sell it to places that are storing that oil. And so what's happened now is everybody has oil production, huge amount of oil production. Lots of oil taps are off, and there's lots of stored oil, and there's not enough demand. And so I think Trump is trying to create that demand by ruining gas mileage in cars. Like, this is literally part of his strategy, except it's not going to work because car producers see the market benefits of of telling people that, well, I get better gas mileage than the other guy. And consumers remember a period of time where gas was $4. And, it's cheap now, but, 220, 250, it's not cheap. I mean, it's cheap compared to $4. But, it still costs money to drive. And so I don't see a massive global demand increase, but supply keeps going up. And so now there's another piece to this, though. Then why would people push for the Keystone oil pipeline at all? If you were an oil producer and you produce 90% of the oil on the market, these are fake numbers, hypothetical numbers, then that means that even if the price isn't very good, you're still getting 90% of the sales. So that's great. And then when the price goes up, you're in a dominant position. The problem is, as everybody's playing the same game, if they stop their production, they save money, and they can wait until the price goes up again, and then they can start production. But in that period of time, they've lost market value. They've lost market share. So let's say the U.S. pulls back production. Saudi Arabia might increase production. And then the price of oil goes up a little bit, and U.S. increases production, and the price drops. This is more or less the game we're in. And so something like the Keystone Oil Pipeline or Arctic drilling, they're only going to benefit a few players because it's going to help them, those individuals, get more oil onto the market faster. That's not going to help with the overall economy. What would help with the overall economy is if supply were to drop and now you have lots of producers making more money. All of this relates to foreign policy because we have no foreign policy vision. You have had 3 presidents in a row that are extremely reactive. They fight battles or maybe campaigns, but they're not fighting the war. And I'm using this as an analogy, okay? There's no plan. There's no integration of domestic politics and energy policy and environmental policy and research and development and foreign policy and foreign relations. No one is keeping their eyes on what's going to happen in 20 or 30 or 40 years. Now, Obama did this a little bit with his energy policy. But then he made other sacrifices in his actual foreign policy. This translates directly to the relationship with Russia. Russia has a stranglehold over Europe because Russia produces a huge amount of their natural gas that Europe runs on. Now, the United States produces its own natural gas, and natural gas is a bit more interesting because it's harder to transport. It's more likely to be transported on pipelines than, say, a tanker or a truck. And, but we can liquefy it, which makes it easier to transport. Then you can fill a big tanker with liquid natural gas, and that you can ship that overseas. You have Democrats like Ed Markey from Massachusetts who have fought and fought and fought and fought and fought